On April 25th, 2026, a 69-year-old Dutch woman boarded a flight in South Africa. She had just left the MV Hondius, a luxury polar expedition cruise ship that had departed Argentina 3 weeks earlier, because she was feeling unwell, gastrointestinal symptoms, the kind of thing that gets you off a ship and onto a plane home. She never made it home. She deteriorated during the flight to Johannesburg. She died upon arrival at the emergency department on April 26th. She later tested positive by PCR for Hantavirus infection, Cybercuba. She was the second person to die on the Hondius voyage. Her husband, a 70-year-old Dutchman, had died on board on April 11th, 2 weeks earlier, after developing a fever, headache, and respiratory distress. A husband and wife. The same ship, the same virus. The beautiful journey they experienced together was abruptly and permanently cut short, the couple's family said in a statement. Wikipedia. And here is the detail that transforms a tragic maritime medical emergency into something more alarming. When that woman boarded her flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg on April 25th, she was already sick. Contact tracing for passengers on that flight has been initiated. 88 people were on board. The tech marketer, 88 people. On a plane with a dying woman carrying a strain of hantavirus that the World Health Organization has now confirmed is capable of spreading between humans. Those 88 people scattered to cities across the world before anyone knew she was positive. Stay with me, because the 3 deaths on the Hondius are the story everyone is covering. The ship anchored off Cape Verde. The country is refusing to let it dock. The passengers trapped at sea. All of it real. All of it alarming. But the story that has a harder edge, the story that explains why health authorities across 5 countries are in emergency coordination mode this morning, is not on the ship. It is in the cities where those 88 passengers went after landing in Johannesburg. In the hospitals in Switzerland and South Africa where confirmed cases are being treated. In the contact tracing race against a virus with an 8-week incubation window, in an age when anyone can be in 3 countries in 72 hours. And there is one more detail. The specific strain of hantavirus on the Hondius is not the common kind. It is the kind with a specific, documented, confirmed history of spreading from person to person. That changes almost everything about how this outbreak has to be managed. First, the virus. Human hantavirus infection is primarily acquired through contact with the urine, feces, or saliva of infected rodents. It is a rare but severe disease that can be deadly. The tech marketer rare. The word the WHO uses consistently about hantavirus is rare. Not emerging, not pandemic risk, rare. While hantavirus is rare, it is highly deadly. About 38% of people who develop respiratory symptoms may die, according to the CDC. Symptoms start similar to the flu, with patients suffering from fatigue, fevers, chills, and aches. But over time, the virus can damage the heart, lungs, or kidneys, causing patients to suffer severe shortness of breath, organ failure, and even death. There is no specific treatment for hantavirus beyond managing symptoms. Patients with severe breathing difficulties may need to be intubated. CBS News 38%. Of people who develop respiratory symptoms, no specific treatment, no antiviral, no targeted therapy. Doctors manage symptoms, oxygen, ventilation, fluids, intensive care, and wait for the patient's immune system to determine the outcome. The illness begins unremarkably. Fever, fatigue, aches. The kind of presentation that sends a person to urgent care, not an isolation ward. The kind that gets a woman onto a plane from St. Helena to Johannesburg before anyone knows she's carrying it. And then, within days, it accelerates. Illness onset was characterized by fever, gastrointestinal symptoms, rapid progression to pneumonia, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and shock. The tech marketer rapid. The progression to respiratory failure can happen within 24 to 48 hours of the first serious symptoms. Case 1, the Dutch husband, developed fever, headache, and diarrhea on April 6th. By April 11th, 5 days later, he was dead. Here's the detail that changes the calculus for every public health official tracking this outbreak. Most hantavirus strains infect humans through contact with infected rodents. A person cleans a barn, breathes in aerosolized rodent droppings, gets exposed. Isolated case, no secondary spread. The person who is sick does not infect their spouse, their doctor, their fellow passengers on a plane. While the rare disease is typically caused by contact with infected rodents' urine, feces, or saliva, the WHO said some human transmission may have occurred among people on board the vessel. And after sequencing the virus from some of those infected, health authorities confirmed this outbreak was caused by the Andes strain, which is known to have previously had some limited spread between people. CBS News, the Andes strain, native to South America, Argentina, Chile, Bolivia, named for the mountain range where it was first characterized. The only hantavirus strain with confirmed, documented human-to-human transmission. The husband died on April 11th. His wife, who was a close contact, developed symptoms and died on April 26th. The WHO has not confirmed that his death caused hers. Both had traveled in South America before boarding the Hondius on April 1st. The source exposure, whether it was in Argentina or on the ship or from another passenger, has not been fully determined. But the sequencing is confirmed. The strain is the Andes strain. And the Andes strain has a documented history of spreading between people who are in close contact with an infected individual. The WHO has emphasized that the outbreak does not pose a wider public health risk. The tech marketer, the WHO, is not raising global alarm. It is not declaring an emergency. It is conducting contact tracing and coordinating a response between 5 countries. Its own representative sought to assuage fears, saying hantavirus is not a pandemic-level threat, but assuaging fears and racing to contact 88 passengers on a flight are not contradictory actions. They are simultaneous actions. And right now, both are happening. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. The Hondius departed Ushuaia, Argentina, on April 1st, 2026. The vessel followed an itinerary across the South Atlantic with multiple stops in remote and ecologically diverse regions, including mainland Antarctica, South Georgia, Nightingale Island, Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, and Ascension Island. The extent of passenger contact with local wildlife during the voyage or prior to boarding in Ushuaia remains undetermined. Nightingale Island, Tristan da Cunha, some of the most remote inhabited and uninhabited landmasses on Earth. Islands where the wildlife, the seabirds, the rodents, the ecosystems have evolved in almost complete isolation from human contact. The passengers on the Hondius were not luxury beach vacationers. They were expedition travelers, people who specifically chose a voyage that took them to places almost no human beings go. Places with wildlife that has minimal exposure to humans and no established surveillance for zoonotic disease spillover. The source of the Andes strain infection on the Hondius has not been confirmed. Argentina's Tierra del Fuego province director of epidemiology, Juan Facundo Petrina, told the AP, the passengers could have been incubating the disease if they acquired it within the country or elsewhere in the world. He noted that the province hasn't historically seen hantavirus cases, but infections have broken out in other Argentine provinces, leading to 28 deaths nationwide last year. Direct relief, 28 deaths in Argentina last year from hantavirus, in a country where the Andes strain is endemic, where it circulates in rodent populations in the Patagonian foothills and the Andean valleys, where contact between rural workers and infected rodents produces cases every season. The couple who died both traveled in South America before boarding. They may have been exposed before they set foot on the ship, or they may have been exposed on the ship, or on one of the remote islands. The investigation is ongoing. The source is not confirmed. And until it is confirmed, every passenger who walked the same wildlife-rich landscapes, breathed the same remote island air, shared the same confined shipboard spaces with 146 other people for 5 weeks, is a contact that needs to be traced. Here is the case record as the WHO documented it, because the sequence tells a story that no press briefing has fully assembled. Case 1. An adult male developed symptoms of fever, headache, and mild diarrhea on April 6th while on board the ship. By April 11th, the case developed respiratory distress and died on board. No microbiological tests were performed. The tech marketer. He died without a confirmed diagnosis. The ship's medical officer recognized severe respiratory illness. There was no test for hantavirus on board. He was buried at sea or his body retained on the ship. The WHO report does not specify. His death was reported to health authorities, but the specific cause was not yet identified. Case 2. An adult female, who was a close contact of Case 1, went ashore at St. Helena on April 24th with gastrointestinal symptoms. She subsequently deteriorated during a flight to Johannesburg on April 25th. She died upon arrival at the emergency department on April 26th. On May 4th, the case was subsequently confirmed by PCR with hantavirus infection. Contact tracing for passengers on the flight has been initiated. The tech marketer. She died on April 26th. She was confirmed positive on May 4th, 9 days between her death and the confirmation that the people who flew with her needed to be found. Case 3. An adult male presented to the ship's doctor on April 24th with febrile illness, shortness of breath, and signs of pneumonia. On April 26th, his condition worsened. He was medically evacuated from Ascension to South Africa on April 27th, where he is currently hospitalized in an ICU. The tech marketer currently in the ICU. As of the WHO report published May 4th, 2 days ago. Case 4. An adult female with presentation of pneumonia died on May 2nd. Onset of symptoms was on April 28th, with fever and a general feeling of being unwell. The tech marketer, April 28th to May the 2nd. 4 days from first symptoms to death. 3 confirmed deaths, 1 in the ICU. 3 more with mild symptoms still on the ship. 7 cases from a vessel carrying 147 people. A 4. 7% infection rate in a confined environment where people share dining rooms, excursion groups, and the same recycled ship air. Here's the story that nobody expected to become a political crisis, and became one. The MV Hondius needed a port, a real port, with medical facilities, with quarantine capacity, with the infrastructure to safely disembark 140 plus passengers from 23 nationalities under controlled conditions. Cape Verde said no. Cape Verde's health ministry said it will not allow the ship to dock because of public health concerns. It sent medical teams to assist the crew, but prevented the ship from docking at its ports. Direct relief. The ship's operator, Oceanwide Expeditions, needed an alternative. Spain's central government in Madrid stepped in. The health minister said the Hondius would be permitted to dock at Tenerife in the Canary Islands, an autonomous region of Spain in the Atlantic, about 1,400 kilometers from the Spanish mainland. Spain's government cited international law and humanitarian principles. The WHO and the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control both endorsed Tenerife as a viable option. The Spanish health minister said those still on board were not presenting symptoms, and that docking posed no threat to the public. Then the president of the Canary Islands said no. The Canary Islands, an autonomous region of Spain, refused to allow the luxury cruise ship to dock at any of its ports. The president of the Canary Islands, Fernando Clavijo, said regional authorities could not allow the MV Hondius to enter the archipelago, saying authorities lacked enough information about the outbreak to guarantee public safety. CBS News' Clavijo belongs to the Conservative People's Party, which is Sanchez's main opposition. The tech marketer. The opposition party controls the Canary Islands regional government. The national government in Madrid is led by Pedro Sanchez. The Canary Islands president called for an urgent meeting with the prime minister. The health minister hit back publicly, saying the government had been in constant contact with Clavijo at both a technical and political level. A luxury expedition ship carrying passengers from 23 nationalities, 3 dead, 1 in the ICU, anchored off the coast of Africa, has become the subject of a constitutional dispute between Madrid and the Canary Islands regional government, routed through the fault lines of Spanish national politics. The Hondius approached the islands, and the regional head said he would not permit the cruise ship to land. CBS News, the ship was heading for Tenerife. The central government said it could dock. The regional president said it couldn't. And the 140 passengers on board, who represent 23 nationalities, who have not been sick, who are not presenting symptoms, who have been living under strict isolation protocols and hygiene measures for days, are the ones waiting to find out which government wins. Here is what is not making headlines. The MV Hondius is not the only vessel in the world's oceans today carrying people who may have been exposed to this outbreak. The vessel departed Ushuaia on April 1st, with 88 passengers and 59 crew from 23 nationalities. Multiple stops in remote regions included mainland Antarctica, South Georgia, Nightingale Island, Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, and Ascension Island. The tech marketer, multiple remote islands. Some of them, like Tristan da Cunha, one of the most remote, permanently inhabited islands on Earth, receive fewer than 10 ship visits per year. If the Hantavirus source was an environmental exposure at one of those island stops, the question of what other vessels stopped at the same location in the same window is relevant to any investigation. But the specific contact tracing challenge that has not received its own coverage is the 88-person flight. The WHO is rushing to complete contact tracing, including contacting the 88 people on a flight one of the victims took before she died to contain the outbreak. CBS News. The flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg on April 25th. 88 passengers, one of whom was a woman who would die the next day of confirmed Andes strain Hantavirus. St. Helena is a British overseas territory in the South Atlantic, one of the remotest airports in the world, served by a tiny number of weekly flights. The people on that flight are identifiable. They boarded a scheduled service. Their contact details are in a passenger manifest. But they are in cities now, possibly 23 different countries. Some of them may already be experiencing the early symptoms: fever, fatigue, aches, that mimic influenza and would not trigger a hantavirus alert in a physician who has never seen a case. Switzerland has confirmed that one of its nationals, who was on board the ship, contracted the illness and is receiving treatment in Zurich, with authorities saying the patient does not pose a threat to the public. In South Africa, one person, a British national, is being treated for the Andes strain. CBS News Switzerland. South Africa. 2 confirmed cases outside the ship in 2 separate countries, both being treated in isolation, both monitored, both telling the world that this outbreak is already in multiple continents. The ship is the visible part. The 88 people on the flight are the invisible part. Here's the medical reality that the WHO's careful language around not a wider public health risk correctly frames, but that deserves to be stated plainly. About 38% of people who develop respiratory symptoms from hantavirus may die. There is no specific treatment beyond managing symptoms. CBS News, 38% case fatality rate. in those who develop the severe respiratory presentation. For comparison, the 1918 Spanish flu, the deadliest pandemic in recorded history, had an estimated case fatality rate of approximately 5%. COVID-19 in its original Wuhan strain had an estimated case fatality rate of roughly 1 to 3%. Hantavirus, in those who develop the severe form, kills more than 1 in 3. The reason it is not a pandemic concern is not because it is not deadly, it is because it is extraordinarily difficult to acquire. Rodent contact is required for initial exposure. The Andes strain's human-to-human transmission, while documented, appears to require close, prolonged contact, not casual proximity. But those 140 people on the Hondius have been in close, prolonged contact for 5 weeks, in a ship where they share ventilation systems, dining rooms, excursion groups, and narrow corridors. And the 4 people who have already died, in a matter of days each from first symptom to death, died with no specific treatment available except what a ship's doctor and then a South African emergency department could provide. The WHO is right that this is not a pandemic. It is wrong that this fact alone resolves the situation for the passengers currently on the Hondius, or for the 88 people on the April 25th flight who do not yet know they are being traced. Now pull back to the structural picture that this outbreak reveals. The MV Hondius is not a standard cruise ship. It is an ice-class expedition vessel, designed specifically for polar and remote destination voyages. Its parent company, Oceanwide Expeditions, specializes in routes to Antarctica, the Arctic, the South Atlantic, and exactly the kind of remote island chains, Tristan da Cunha, South Georgia, Nightingale Island, that form the Hondius's April itinerary. These voyages take wealthy, adventurous travelers to places where the wildlife is unhabituated, the disease surveillance is essentially non-existent, and the medical infrastructure is limited to a ship's doctor and whatever the nearest major city can provide after an airlift. The ship left Ushuaia in southern Argentina on April 1st. Health officials there said they confirmed no passengers had hantavirus symptoms when the Hondius departed. But because symptoms can appear up to 8 weeks after exposure, the passengers could have been incubating the disease if they acquired it within the country or elsewhere in the world, said Petrina, the Tierra del Fuego epidemiologist. Direct relief. 8 weeks. The incubation window for hantavirus can extend to 8 weeks. The Hondius departed April 1st. 8 weeks from April 1st is May 27th. The passengers who disembark healthy in Tenerife, if the ship is allowed to dock, will be cleared for repatriation after a medical evaluation. But the incubation window does not close when they disembark. It closes at the end of May. And they will be home, in their own cities, with their own physicians who may or may not think to test for hantavirus when a patient presents with fever and fatigue in late May. So ask yourself 3 questions. Case 2, the Dutch woman, died on April 26th. She was confirmed positive for Andes strain hantavirus by PCR on May 4th. Contact tracing for the 88 passengers on her April 25th flight was initiated after the May 4th confirmation. 9 days elapsed between her death and the laboratory confirmation that the people who sat near her on a plane needed to be identified and contacted. The Andes strain has a documented history of human-to-human transmission in close contacts. The average incubation period is 2 to 4 weeks. Some of those 88 passengers may already be past the midpoint of their incubation window. How many of them have been successfully contacted as of this morning? And what is the protocol for a passenger on that flight who cannot be located, whose name is in the manifest, but whose current country of residence is not the country where they boarded? The tech marketer. Spain's national government said the Hondius could dock at Tenerife. The Canary Islands regional president said it could not. Spain's health minister said docking poses no threat to the public. The WHO and the ECDC endorsed Tenerife as a viable option. The regional president demanded an urgent meeting with the prime minister and called for more information before permitting docking. The 140 people on the Hondius who are not sick, who are not presenting symptoms, who have been under strict isolation and hygiene protocols for days, are currently anchored at sea, while the government of Spain and the government of the Canary Islands disagree about who has jurisdiction over a decision that international law and the international health regulations place squarely within the national government's authority. If the regional government of the Canary Islands can effectively override the national government's decision on a WHO-endorsed humanitarian docking in a country where national law supersedes regional law on public health emergencies, what is the legal mechanism by which Spain's national government enforces its decision? And how long does that mechanism take when 140 people are at sea? CBS News. And if the WHO representative sought to assuage fears by saying hantavirus is not a pandemic-level threat, and the WHO is simultaneously racing to contact 88 people who flew with a confirmed case, coordinating responses across 5 countries, managing a ship quarantine in the Atlantic, and tracking confirmed cases in Switzerland and South Africa. At what point does the phrase, not a pandemic level threat, become a communication strategy rather than a complete description of what is happening? And who is responsible for communicating the difference to the people who are receiving a contact tracing call they did not expect from a health department in a country they briefly passed through, asking where they have been and whether they have a fever? Right now, as you read this, the MV Hondius is sailing toward Tenerife. Spain's health minister says the ship is expected to dock within 3 days. Those still on board are not presenting symptoms. The 14 Spanish passengers will be transported to a military hospital after examination. Other passengers will be repatriated. CBS News 3 more days at sea for people who boarded a luxury polar expedition on April 1st, expecting to see Antarctica and return home by mid-May, who have watched 3 of their fellow passengers die, who have been eating meals alone in their cabins and wearing masks in the corridors and waiting, day after day, for a country to decide they are allowed to come ashore. Travel vlogger Jake Rosmarin, a passenger on the ship, said in a statement that the atmosphere remains calm and that passengers were generally composed. Social distancing is being followed and passengers have the option to have meals delivered to their cabins. Wikipedia, generally composed. In a ship with 3 dead and 1 in the ICU. In Zurich, a Swiss national is in treatment for Andes strain Hantavirus. In South Africa, a British national is in treatment. In cities across the world that are not yet named in any public report, 88 people who boarded a flight from St. Helena on April 25th are living their lives, going to work, picking up their children, seeing their doctors for routine appointments. While a contact tracing operation tries to find each of them before the incubation window closes. 23 nationalities on board. Illness onset between April 6th and April 28th. A hantavirus strain confirmed to spread between humans in close contact. An incubation window that extends to 8 weeks from exposure. The tech marketer, 8 weeks from the first case onset on April 6th is June 1st. The ship will dock in Tenerife this week. The passengers will be repatriated to their home countries. The contact tracing of the 88 people on the Johannesburg flight is ongoing. And somewhere in a city that no press release has named, a person who sat 3 rows behind case 2 on a flight from St. Helena to Johannesburg on April 25th woke up this morning with a slight fever. They are not worried about it yet.